Sound it out. Give us the scene.
Okay, so there's a stick figure hanging upside down in a tree.
Right.
And there's another stick figure standing on the ground, and he's kind of looking at the guy in the tree, and he's got a top hat on, and he's kind of giving him, you know, a scowl. And the guy in the tree says, "You were once shoved head first through someone's." Stop acting so dignified. So that's so funny. Yeah, that is funny.
Great. Where did you even find that?
That strikes a chord somewhere, Ring-Ting, doesn't it?
It
We all
resonates.
came from Everybody just needs to stop. Okay?
Thank you, darling.
We've all had one experience in common. Oh, mercy.
And with that,
With that, we go to Song of Solomon.
How appropriate.
exactly.
Oh,
It's the Lebanon Cedars.
Well, we are talking about the Savior being born, actually, so,
Right.
of a virgin, so
Exactly.
it does tie.
oh, my least favorite book. It was the hardest one to get a handle on in terms of what it means.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Okay, I get that.
But I don't have a problem understanding it, I just don't know what it means.
Well, I'm not even there, I'm not even close to there. Read through one.
Oh, dear.
Like, woo!
This book doesn't know what it means.
I know. Oh, dear. Its Hebrew title is Shir Hashirim, the Song of Songs.
Oh,
That's where we
I
get
thought we
it.
were doing Isaiah.
I'm going to do Isaiah. Someone got on me about not doing the Song of Songs. Solomon.
I hate it. I was laying in my bed. I'm like, we're doing Isaiah. I gotta go.
Well, we're going to do Song of Songs, and then I got a little bit on the prophets I want to do, just as an overview of the prophets when we jump into Isaiah. So
All right,
that
not
might be all we'll get
disappointed
tonight.
or anything.
Okay. Okay, the Latin title
I've
was...
already ruined the page.
You did. Save it for next time.
Sorry. Obviously, too many Girl Scout cookies. Pardon me.
Oh, dear. Okay, the Latin title was Canticles, and you probably, some of them still have that. It's in the Hebrew canon with what are called the festival rolls, and now Judaism reads it at Passover. Authorship, we don't know. Tradition says Solomon, primarily because it's in the title, Song of Solomon, but it could be Song of Solomon, Song about Solomon, Song to Solomon, Song for Solomon. We're not sure. But the ancient, and I read where even some of the ancients attributed to Hezekiah during the time when he was penning everything down. And when you read through it, you see Solomon's mentioned a number of times in the text, at least the name Solomon, but none of it infers authorship. Nothing in the text indicates when it was written, in terms of historical notations in the text, or where, other than Tirzah's mentioned, Jerusalem's mentioned, but there's no indication that that's where they were, whatever. Just because Tirzah's mentioned in there, you probably get the impression that it's before the kingdom divides. So it's probably sometime after Solomon's reign. The interpretive part of it, whether or not it's the relating of an actual love story, or it's just a figurative love story, or it's a typical story. And when I say typical, it could be God's love for Israel, or it could be typical of Christ's love for the church. Some say it's typical of Christ's love for the soul. Some would argue that it's just a wedding cycle. It's a collection of nuptial poems, and they'll read it at a Hebrew wedding.
Some sect of the Jews, it says they read it every Friday night.
Oh, is that right? Oh, yeah.
Getting ready for the
Imagine
weekend.
that.
I knew I'm Brian.
Well, get ready for the Sabbath, so. It's an activity of the Sabbath. Some would argue that it's cultic, that it's an adaptation of a Mesopotamian fertility cult liturgy. So, we find this stuff written all over. It's the most perplexing book in the Old Testament. I read a comment today in 1657 at the Westminster Assembly. They said that at that time there were extant 500 copies on the Song of Solomon, and all they contributed was just more confusion. Oh dear. Didn't contribute much to anybody's understanding of it, just confusion.
The ESV just gives four. Besides the traditional, they give alternate interpretations they call allegorical, anthology, the
yeah.
Shepherd hypothesis,
Right.
and the Solomon-Shulamite interpretation.
Right, yeah. Well, part of it is you have no idea who the characters are, other than he or she, or them, friends. But you don't know who the he is.
Well, in the mentioning of Solomon.
Yeah, in the mentioning of Solomon. So the assumption is, there's the two characters interpretation where it's Solomon and the Shulamite. Then there's the three character interpretation where it's the Shulamite and the shepherd that she's interested in Solomon. And Solomon's trying to horn in on it.
Like a boyer.
Yeah, right. Because at that point the text says that Solomon has 60 wives and 80 concubines. And then he's attracted to the Shulamite. And so he's trying to horn in on that. So there's just no way of knowing. It could be that it's Solomon trying to horn in on it because it says she's so beautiful, whatever, and he's just attracted, whatever, so we don't know. We just don't know. There was a period of time when Song of Solomon, I don't remember if in the early part we talked about books that were Hamalagumena and the books that were Antilegumena. Some spoke against it. Well, Song of Solomon was in that category for quite a while. That it was spoken against by some. But the thing are faced with in terms of trying to handle it and understand it is that Jesus authenticates the Old Testament. And by the time of the Lord Jesus, Song of Solomon was in the Old Testament. It was part of the narrative. So somehow it points to Christ. We just wrestle with exactly how it points to Christ. So we just can't ignore it completely. Although it's hard. I took some outlines from others because I've never tried to outline it. The lovers yearn for each other, chapter 1, verse 2 through chapter 2, 17. Then the shepherdess dreams, chapter 3, verse 1 through chapter 6, verse 3. That's where the Shulamite dreams.
Is the Shulamite like an Egyptian?
No, the Shulamite was from one of the tribes up north, probably Shechem or whatever, in that area. So she's this young girl that is supposedly, in one of the interpretations that Solomon yearns for. Chapter 6, verse 4 through chapter 8, verse 4, the lovers yearn for each other again. And then chapter 8, verse 5 through 14, the lovers join in marriage. Unique characteristics. I don't think God is mentioned in the text. It's like Esther. I just quickly skimmed it again a few minutes ago, and I can't find God in the text anywhere. It's the only book where human love, or love between humans, is the main plot and theme. So it's extolling that. There's no specific or direct reference to sin in the book. There's no specific or direct reference to the religious realm at all in the book. The whole focus of the book is on the love between a man and a woman. No other Old Testament book is alluded to in the text. And Song of Solomon is not alluded to by Christ or quoted anywhere in the New Testament. There's no allusion to Song of Solomon in the New Testament. So the purpose of the book has to be to extol the virtues of the physical relationship between a man and a woman in the context of a monogamous marriage.
Which Solomon's not a very good example
That's
of.
not a very good example of it. Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know. I mean, that's why it's just the book has got me bad. It's the one book I'm most uncomfortable about in terms of just exactly what it's trying to teach. You can argue something in there, but if you read Watchman Nee, if you read Harry Ironside, you read a lot of these other deeper life people, they've got all these allegorical or typical things in terms of what Song of Solomon means.
I don't say it's a dream.
Yeah.
The whole thing's a dream.
I mean, I've got a couple choruses I've learned out of it. There's some neat phrases in there, but that's about it. So that's all the contribution I can make of the Song of Solomon. That was one reason why I was going to just avoid it. All right, now let's consider the role of prophets before we talk about a prophet. Because prophets are unique in one sense.
Verse memorized in Song of Solomon?
His banner over me was, he brought me into his banqueting house, and his banner over me was love. I think Song of Solomon 1 verse 4.
That's a song.
Yeah, he brought me into his banqueting house, and his banner over me was love. Was love, his banner over me was love. 1-4? Isn't it 1-4?
Oh, voice that.
No.
Oh, I thought it was 1-4.
Maybe it is.
Shame on me.
Yay.
Oh.
So you don't have a verse in the Song
I
of
don't
Solomon?
I thought I did. Oh,
Therefore the virgins love you, draw me away.
oh, that isn't mine. Where is it?
Oh, it's 2-4.
2-4. I knew it was 4.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, and he made me keep the vineyards, and my own vineyard did I keep. Taketh the little foxes that spoil the vine. So little phrases I've got out of it. I am my beloved is mine. Okay, in the Old Testament, in the narrative, we have this designation of a Navi, the prophet.
Can you spell that?
N-E-V-I would be how it's pronounced.
That's okay. Close enough.
In the Hebrew, it's N-A-B-I, or yeah. In Hebrew, if you make a letter like that,
Oh, hang there, yeah.
that is a, it's without a dot in here, it's a ba.
Oh, okay.
With a dot in there, it's a ba.
Oh,
And then you read it this way. So when you write the prophet, you write it like this. It would be Nabi. This is an N. This is the, I'll take this out of there. N. And this is the vowel A. And this is the V. And this little thing here is the I. and so in Hebrew, when you make a D, you make a D like this. And this little thing here is the tittle. And this little thing here is the jot.
The jot, the tittle,
Oh,
and the
the
iota.
tittle.
That's right. So when Jesus said the jot or a tittle, he's talking about this part. And that little deal right there in the Hebrew alphabet. So much for my Hebrew.
Post-traumatic stress syndrome. Did you learn war? He's tried to teach me. I couldn't get it. So we had to creep, but I couldn't get it.
Stephen used to come over to the office. Stephen was the younger brother. And he'd come over and say, Dad, Suzanne's crying again. She's crying again.
See, my father didn't know me.
it was after you, huh?
Oh, yeah.
Well, I did it
And that's why she's
purposefully.
mad at you.
My long-term, one of my goals was to help Stephen understand that irrespective of how bright or not bright you are, everybody has a hard time with certain things.
Oh, I was an example. Nice.
She was a living example for me. Scapegoat. Okay, another word for the Hebrew prophet was ro'at, which means seer. Ro'at is one of the vowel verbs for seeing. And so a prophet was also called a seer, one who could see. Remember Balaam, at first he's called a prophet in Numbers 22 when they get him, and then when these end up killing him, and he's killed in that battle, then he's called Balaam the seer. First he was called a prophet of God, and then he's called a seer when they put him to death.
Hosea? H-O-Z-E-H?
Hosea? That must be another one I'm not familiar
It's
with.
next to the row, the
Ro'at?
one you just said.
Hosea. Oh, I can't remember that one. look it up later.
It says the former means visionary while the latter means seer.
Seer, oh yeah, okay.
What Bible do you have?
That's ESV.
Study Bible.
It's a good one. Yeah, it's a good one.
Cheap, $26.
Yeah, it's really good. Okay, and then the other phrase would be, when you go through the Old Testament, you'll see the phrase, my servants, the prophets. Over and over again, that phrase will be repeated. That God says, these are my servants, the prophets. And when I send you this, I'll give you a lot of references to that. When the Israelites are ready to go into the land of Canaan, and God tells them to destroy everybody in there, He also tells them not to associate with certain people who are diviners or whatever. And what does He tell them that they could rely on rather than relying on those sorts of people? You don't remember from the book of Deuteronomy? Well, anyway, in Deuteronomy He tells them when they get in the land, rather than do that, He will raise up prophets for them to give them the information that they need. And then He gives them tests to tell whether or not this prophet is really one of His prophets. And do you remember those tests?
Well,
Go ahead.
they say something and they die, they weren't.
Okay. Well, that was close.
I like that one.
Incorrect, they'll be killed. They can be killed.
Okay, if incorrect in terms of what?
If they prophesy something that ends up being false,
Right. Okay.
then they are killed.
Right, good. So if the prophecy doesn't come to pass 100%,
They can't push another God.
yeah,
And no
right.
Nostradamus stuff, right?
That's right. They can't give them information that leads them away from what's been revealed. That's Deuteronomy 13. And Deuteronomy 18 says that if what they say doesn't come to pass, then they're not a prophet of God. And then what are they supposed to do to those prophets? Kill them.
I
Buff
have
them
a
off.
question. Some of the prophets prophesize about things like long in the future.
Right.
So how did they know whether or not they were real prophets at the
They
time?
wouldn't at that point, in terms of something that's way
Which is
distant.
why so
They
many
would have
people
already
get away
tested
with it.
him
Like,
on
I'm wondering,
something
like,
else.
why in Jeremiah there are so
Right.
many prophets getting
Right.
away with lying.
Oh, yeah, right.
Which means Satan can't foretell the future. Or else
Oh,
it's
he's
a
not
valid
on
test.
this.
Right.
Because the whole point, I mean, when God said He would send prophets, other nations already had prophets, right? That's how the Jews knew what a prophet was.
Right, yep.
So those other prophets were prophesying,
Mhm.
and evidently none of them could foretell the future.
Right,
Or else
right,
how would you
right.
make it a test?
Yeah, yeah, right. And you have to remember, most of what the prophet did, it was not to focus on the future. Was to just address the people in terms of what they were doing and trying to call them back to obedience to the commands that God had already given them. There were some prophetic things, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Three categories of the prophets. There were prophets that were pre-monarchy, before they ever had a king. At this point, they're mouthpieces, acting as leaders, speaking to the people. Moses, Deborah, and then Samuel during the transitional period before the monarchy. Then we have the prophets that come up after the monarchy's in position. And there's a category that they've labeled pre-classical. Classical prophets were prophets who write. And then there were the pre-classical prophets. And there are a whole host of them. I mean, I've listed, I'll send this list to you, but I've got probably a dozen or more who are oral prophets, didn't write anything down. We have no record other than the fact that they were in the divine record as having been prophets. And then there are the classical prophets. The classical prophets were the ones who wrote. How many prophets are writing prophets? How many prophets do we have in the prophetic books?
Well, do you count somebody else wrote for them?
Such as?
Well, didn't Jeremiah and the scribe wrote?
Yeah, but I mean, it was...
But would you count him as class?
No. That'd be Baruch. I mean, Baruch was a scribe. But he wrote down, all he wrote down was he was like an amanuensis, like Tertius in Romans 16. I, Tertius, who wrote this epistle, greet you. But it was Paul's epistle to the Romans. And he was just a scribe, a writer.
So, so you would consider Jeremiah a classical prophet?
Oh, yes, yeah, right, because it's it's his prophecies that
He
are
doesn't
being written
have to be
down.
the actual scribe.
He doesn't have to be the one penning it down. Yeah. In fact, we don't know if, a lot of them did pen it down or had someone else pen it down for them. Yeah, yeah. Other than in terms of Paul's writing, when he says, you know this because I've with my own hand there, I've written across something in one of them, yeah. Okay. But anyway, how many are there? All the minor ones?
Minor.
And why are they listed, why do we call them minor as opposed to major?
Yeah, short.
Yeah, just the amount of writing they did. Right.
Some places they were counting Joshua and,
Yeah, 16 or 17.
That's major and minor.
Yeah, major and minor. Yeah. Major and minor. Major just in terms of the length of what they've written. Beside the book of Psalms, what are the other longest books in the Bible?
Is it, I want to say Jeremiah, because it should be Mark.
Jeremiah, that's very good. 50 months to read through it.
I don't know.
So we got the Psalms, Jeremiah, and one other one of the prophets would be a long one.
Isaiah, Jeremiah,
And the Psalms.
and the Psalms.
Yeah, yeah. And then it'd probably be Ezekiel. Yeah. Yeah. Good. Now, one of the things when you read the prophets, don't make the mistake of mistaking the vision itself for the message.
Oh, you mean the vision like that?
He's
You're
told-
seeing the temple, Ezekiel's
That's
seeing the
right,
temple,
yeah.
we're not, that's not the
Yeah,
message.
That's right. Yeah, a lot of times because there'll be lots of symbolism in there, people are just trying to get all the symbolism and some specific interpretation because of this, and this, and this, and this, rather than think that's just part of the vision, and the vision is trying to communicate something. And so what is the vision trying to communicate? Yeah, the vision is the occasion for the message. We'll look at a couple here in a minute. Okay, categories of these oracles that the prophets have. First category is indictment. It's a statement of offense. Classic illustration of that is Isaiah chapter 1. Isaiah chapter 1 is a courtroom scene. So when Isaiah 1 says, "Come now, let us reason together, though your sins be as scarlet," it's an indictment. God's calling them to account in the courtroom. Yeah. Before the exile, the focus of the indictment is on idolatry, social injustice, and ritualism. After they come back from the exile and they're back home, then the indictment becomes one of not honoring God, not giving God the proper honor. Malachi would be a classic, where you're stealing from me. You're not giving me the tithe that belongs to me. Then the second category would be judgment oracles, where the prophet is announcing punishment that's going to be carried out. Before the exile, the focus is on political issues and judgment that's in the near future for them. It's going to happen soon.
Well, we could use a prophet right now to take on that.
Yeah. Where's Jerry Falwell when we need him? Oops. Don't let that go out. Well, he's in heaven now laughing at us. Saying, yeah, that's right. Oh dear, or Pat. My. Post-exilic, the judgment comes in terms of interpreting recent events or current crises as part of the punishment, what they're going through. Then the third category is instruction. So we have indictment, judgment, and then instruction. And then the aftermath category, where the focus is on the future hope and a future deliverance. Now, in terms of the prophet making a prediction, in one sense, what the prophet, he's not making a prediction, he's telling us what God is going to do. It's not that the prophet's predicting anything. He's telling us what God's going to do.
He's been told.
He's been told, that's right. And so and the focus is on God as the causation of this particular thing that's going to come to pass. Not that the prophet's making any prediction on his own. He's telling us what God is going to do, and it's going to come to pass. Yeah. And so the objective is so that when it comes to pass, you recognize God as the one who's caused it, and give God the praise and the glory because of that. Now, as it pertains to the fulfillment of the prophecy, on lots of things, people are looking for specificity and fulfillment, when generally it's correlation. Closely, not that they're exact fulfillments in some instances, sometimes it will be exact. When the prophet says, and on this altar you're going to burn the bones of old so-and-so and it's going to come apart, that is exactly what happened. But on some of them, it's not quite that way. For instance, when Joseph is told in a dream to go to Egypt, take the baby to Egypt, and then he's told in another dream to bring the baby back, what does the writer say with respect to the baby coming back? When Jesus comes back, and they're going back, they're going to come back into the land, what?
In fulfillment of the scripture.
Which scripture?
I'm guessing Isaiah,
No?
but it's a guess.
Yeah, it's a guess. Yeah. But it's totally, when you read the text, it's totally unrelated. Hosea 11:1, out of Egypt have I called my son. You know, what does that got to do with the Lord Jesus? Remember in Exodus, when Moses goes to Pharaoh and demands that the people are to be let loose to go off to worship, how does he address that to Pharaoh? He says, let my people go, let Israel, my son, go. Israel is God's son. Or Isaiah chapter 5. Isaiah chapter 5 is the song of the vineyard. Israel is my vineyard. And what does John chapter 15 say? And how does it say it?
Christ is the vine.
Christ says, I am the vine. You are the branches. So Israel is the son. Israel is the vine. Jesus is the vine. So it's the correlation. See? It's not exactly, but it's the correlation. Oh. Or, okay, here's the... Ryan, how about read Isaiah chapter 13. Verse 10.
The stars of heaven and their constellations will not give their light. The sun will be darkened in its going forth, and the moon will not cause its light to shine.
Okay. Now, where else do you see that kind of phraseology? Okay, Matthew, the Olivet Discourse. You find it again in Revelation. Now, Isaiah 13 is God's judgment on Babylon. And Babylon was judged, and Babylon did fall. That prophecy was fulfilled, but the stars didn't fall from heaven. The sun didn't stop shining. The moon didn't change color. But the correlation is that Babylon was judged just as the prophet had said in Isaiah 13. That's why when you read the Revelation and you see all the symbolism, you have to go back to the Old Testament and see how the prophets use the symbolism. What do the stars represent? For instance, in Joseph's dream, and he tells his dream to his brothers, and stars are going to fall, and everybody bows down. Well, what did the stars represent? Yeah. Or leaders. Right? So stars are oftentimes are representative of leaders. Right? Isaiah 19:1. Why don't you read that one, Ryan?
Burning against Egypt, behold, the Lord rides on a swift cloud and will come into Egypt. The idols of Egypt will totter at his presence, and the heart of Egypt will melt in its
Right. Isaiah 19 is a prophecy of God's judgment on Egypt. But the phrase I wanted to get is God coming on a cloud. That's right. And so many times when you read the Old Testament, when God comes to judge, he's always riding on a cloud. He's coming on clouds. So part of that you then say, Jesus says, Ryan, why don't you go to Luke 21. Luke 21 is Luke's record of this Olivet Discourse, Matthew 24. And read, I think it's verse 22.
For these are the days of vengeance, that all things which are written may be fulfilled.
Yeah, read 21.
Let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let those who are in the midst of her depart. And let not those who are in the country enter her.
Okay. 19.
It's 20.
I'm looking when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies.
Oh, okay.
Is that 20? 20. Read 20.
Yeah, but when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, then know that this is desolation is near.
Good. So Jesus gives the sermon, and he tells them exactly how to know when it's fulfilled. When that city is surrounded by armies, then he says, all things written have been fulfilled. All things written with respect to that and that covenant are fulfilled when you see that city surrounded by armies. And was that city surrounded by armies? It was surrounded by armies. It was destroyed.
Vengeance refers to God's vengeance and judgment, not Rome.
Oh, I see.
You get the wrong Bible.
That's right. Yeah, so it just, so the point being, we have to let Scripture interpret Scripture, see this correlation in there, and then Jesus' own statements in terms of judgment that's going to fall on that city. And why is that city significant? What does the Bible call that city?
Jerusalem?
Uh-huh. It's the city of?
Well, it's God's bride in some spots.
Okay.
And,
The psalmist calls it the city of the great king. Psalmist calls it the city of the great king. Who's the great king? God. What's in the center of in a sense, the center of that city? The temple. What's the heart of the temple? The Holy of Holies. And what's in the Holy of Holies? The Ark of the Covenant. What's on top of the Ark of the Covenant? The mercy seat. And what does the mercy seat represent? The throne of God. The center of the Hebrew universe is that city. That's why it's so crucial. So if the city is destroyed, God's no longer there in that sense. It's no longer his place. And then Paul talks about this epistle of Galatians, the Jerusalem that's above and the Jerusalem that's down here. In the Jerusalem